Little Miss Sunshine Keeps Her Smile by Roger Hargreaves. Little Miss Sunshine lives in Rise and Shine Cottage on the bank of a river, and Little Miss Sunshine, as her name suggests, is a very happy person. The sort of person who never gets in a bad mood, the sort of person who is the exact opposite of somebody else who appears in this story. That somebody is Mr. Grumpy, and Mr. Grumpy, as his name suggests, is the grumpiest person in the world, the sort of person who is always in a bad mood. Everything annoys him. Flowers growing in his garden, sunny days and rainy days. But the thing that puts Mr. Grumpy in the worst possible mood is seeing other people happy. One morning Mr. Grumpy met Little Miss Sunshine. "Good morning, Mr. Grumpy," said Miss Sunshine cheerfully. "There's nothing good about it," snapped Mr. Grumpy. "Humph," puffed Mr. Grumpy, after Miss Sunshine had left. "That Miss Sunshine is always so abominably happy. Just for once I'd like to see her in a bad mood." It was on his way home that Mr. Grumpy thought of a plan to upset Little Miss Sunshine. He raced home and made a list of all the things that were guaranteed to upset him. It was a very long list. "Now there must be something here that will put Miss Sunshine in a bad mood," he said to himself. Mr. Grumpy was not a very nice man. The first thing Mr. Grumpy had written on his list was waiting for buses. So the next day Mr. Grumpy opened a gate and let all Farmer Field's sheep out into the lane, and the bus was delayed for hours and hours while all the sheep were rounded up. Mr. Grumpy ran round to the bus stop. He chuckled nastily. "I can't wait to see how upset Miss Sunshine is." But Little Miss Sunshine was not upset. In fact, she was not there. It was such a nice day she had decided to walk into town. "Bother," said Mr. Grumpy. The next day Mr. Grumpy looked at the second thing on the list. "Losing," he read out loud. So that evening he invited Miss Sunshine round to his house to play cards, and he cheated. But Little Miss Sunshine, being the happy-go-lucky person she is, did not mind losing. Mr. Grumpy won every game they played. "Oh, well played, Mr. Grumpy," she said at the end of the evening. "Bother, bother," said Mr. Grumpy after she had left. Mr. Grumpy read down his list again. Number 3 said, "Getting caught in the rain." Mr. Grumpy filled up his watering can and, using his ladder, climbed a tree just outside Miss Sunshine's house. And there he waited until Miss Sunshine came out for her walk. But Little Miss Sunshine saw the ladder. "What a silly place to leave a ladder," she said to herself, and walked round the other side of the tree and put the ladder away. "Bother, bother, bother," muttered Mr. Grumpy, who ended up stuck in the tree all night. Well, nearly all night. Just before sunrise he fell asleep and fell out of the tree. The fourth thing on Mr. Grumpy's list was queues. Mr. Grumpy waited until Little Miss Sunshine went shopping, and then he rushed ahead of her to the greengrocer's, where he started an argument with Mrs. Pod about the quality of her peas. As he argued, a queue began to form behind him, and when he glanced back he saw Miss Sunshine standing at the back of the queue. He smiled to himself and carried on arguing until he felt sure she must be fed up of waiting. But when he turned round, the queue had disappeared, and when he went outside he found everyone in the queue happily chatting with Little Miss Sunshine. Double bother, bother. Mr. Grumpy was furious, but then he met Mr. Nosy and had another thoroughly nasty idea. "Do you know," said Mr. Grumpy, "what Little Miss Sunshine calls Miss Bossy behind her back? She calls her knobbly knees." Mr. Grumpy's thoroughly nasty idea was to start a rumour that would get Little Miss Sunshine into trouble, and the rumour spread. Mr. Nosy told Little Miss Star, who told Mr. Uppity, who told Little Miss Splendid, who told Mr. Muddle, who told Little Miss Bossy. "And Little Miss Sunshine said that Mr. Grumpy calls you knobbly knees," said Mr. Muddle. "Does he now?" said Miss Bossy grimly, and marched straight round to Mr. Grumpy's house and biffed him on the nose. It was a very sorry-looking Mr. Grumpy that Little Miss Sunshine met outside her house the next day. Miss Sunshine invited him in for breakfast to cheer him up and cooked him fried eggs. Sunny side up, of course. And did she manage to cheer up Mr. Grumpy? Of course not. No more than Mr. Grumpy can upset Little Miss Sunshine.